everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a great day. Today we are going to talk about something pretty relevant to the gaming industry, and that of course is going to be a small review for Monster Hunter Wilds. Now, the reason I'm calling this a small review is because I have not officially gotten into a lot of the post-game stuff yet, a lot of the end-game content. However, I have completed the main campaign, including all story with cutscenes, and a lot of the major stuff that's going to occur within the first 15 to 20 hours. Now, if you're a Monster Hunter fan, or if you've ever played the series before, you know 15 to 20 hours is literally scratching the surface of a much bigger piece of content, and it is very much the same case here. There is still a vast amount of things for me to do, a ton of quests, a ton of stuff to dig into, and I believe there's even a epilogue of sorts that I am currently going through now. So there is a large amount of stuff for you to do, but what I want to do is really break this down from a newcomer's perspective to Monster Hunter. Now, I'm sure you've seen a ton of videos online before going over how difficult it is to get into Monster Hunter. And honestly, while it is a large barrier to entry, specifically because the series is such a long running franchise with a ton of changes, a ton of different monsters, a ton of different design philosophies, and overall it just has a very niche approach to doing things. At least it does occasionally. I say occasionally because honestly Monster Hunter Wilds is the most streamlined I have ever seen this series. And I know that sounds kind of funny because it seems like every Monster Hunter game is like that, but when I say Monster Hunter Wilds feels vastly different than a lot of Monster Hunters that have come before it, I mean that in the most sincere way possible. So if you are a newcomer to Monster Hunter, Wilds might be a little confusing to you because honestly, Wilds is the most accessible I have ever seen this franchise, and I mean that in terms of the way it's paced, the way progression works, and overall the way the story is presented. This is presented a lot more like a standard action game, and it's weird to me because I'm very much used to the old school way of Monster Hunter, the way that games like Freedom Unite and Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate would do things, where they would essentially drop you in a hub after showing you an opening cutscene. You would do a bunch of starting quests that you would go out and hunt monsters, and then you would eventually get into that grinding loop of killing the monsters, scavenging its parts, going to the smith and upgrading building your new armor set or weapon, and then essentially you go and do it all over again. And that's where a lot of the RPG elements really come into play, is the status buffs and of course the numbers that go alongside your loot and gear. Where Monster Hunter Wilds differs though from a lot of the other Monster Hunter games is the really quick pace and progression of the campaign in the story. It really does do a lot of things very different than past Monster Hunters. In past Monster Hunters, World for example, if you were to play that game, you would have that big opening sequence with Zora Magdaros, and then you would essentially get dropped into the hub where you would then just choose the quests, and cutscenes would occasionally jump in and insert themselves in between hunts. However, with Wilds, what you get is a much more dynamic and much more on rails experience. And I know those two things seem kind of juxtapositioned, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that things happen a lot more naturally. The lead up to fights and the progression in which the story goes is a little less obvious than it has been before. Before you knew, okay, I'm going to go on this quest, and essentially when I go on this quest, I know I will fight this giant baddie, and then I'm going to end it and go over and do it again. But with this, you talk to somebody, you kind of go on a mini expedition, and then you get introduced to the monster, you take out the monster, and it kind of goes in and out of that formula. Even so much so that a lot of the times the cutscenes will kind of shape how the expedition to find the monster, or even the hunt itself. And a lot of it really ties back to the story and the cutscenes. It's all very interwoven, and it feels a lot more, I know streamlined is kind of the buzzword with this game, but it is very streamlined. It's very consistent in its delivery, and it is really going for something that is way more cinematic and overall feels very grandiose. But what you really want to know about, and what you are really here for, regardless of if the story is good, regardless of if the actual experience is up to snuff, you want to know about the monsters and the overall gameplay loop. And I am happy to say I think this is probably the best it's ever been. The way the characters move and the way the monsters interact with the environment around them is so much more dynamic than even World, and World was already a very big step up from past Monster Hunter games. I was really impressed with what they were able to do with World, but it still had a old bone structure for those old Monster Hunter games, and it almost felt like you kind of just threw a nicer coat on those old games, whereas Wilds feels like a very much brand new experience from the ground up. And it really shows down to the animations, the way the monsters move, the way they interact with you when they get hit, when they try to attack you. Everything feels so much more cinematic than it did before. And I certainly have to think part of that is because of the new RE engine that Capcom is using. It is literally doing some things I've never seen not only Monster Hunter games do, but it's doing things I've never seen other games do for animation. It really is impressive, and one of the really nice things is the fact that they've not only made the combat a little more accessible in the way that it works, but they've also given you a lot of different options to weaken the monsters around you. So you are not just pigeonholed to using whatever weapon you choose. You have the options to change weapons mid-fight, which is a brand new thing for Monster Hunter. I've never seen a Monster Hunter game do this, and it is a very weird but much needed add, I feel. Additionally, you can now use the environment around you to not only pick up, your health buffs and all that stuff, but you can also use it to actually destroy monsters, to actually bring down cliffs and low-hanging structures onto monsters, lay traps, things like that. It's a lot more dynamic than I've seen them do in the past, and it overall adds to the feeling that you're on an actual hunt. But of course, with all these additional combat structure changes, it wouldn't be any good if the monsters were not outstanding in their design and were really fun to fight. And I am comfortable saying that out of all the Monster Hunter games I fought, this has some of my favorite monsters out of any Monster Hunter game. What I like is they took a lot of classic designs from older Monster Hunter games and they really gave them a nice spin. They would take like the structure of something like the Nerscylla and create a whole new monster with that base design, but just tweak a few things so that things are new, they are fresh, and it's not even a Nerscylla anymore, so they had to actually give it a whole nother name. I won't say what monster it is because I don't really want to spoil any of the designs here. Obviously, whatever you're seeing in the trailers that I'm showing, I'm doing specifically because I don't want to show you anything that Capcom hasn't shown you. I just feel like that is fair. Also, I don't have gameplay captured because I did play on PS5, so I figure I can't really go wrong just showing you raw footage from Capcom themselves. Another reason though I don't want to show you anything is because if this is your first Monster Hunter game, I really want that experience to be super special for you, because you definitely deserve to be able to experience something as vast and open and really pretty, honestly. Just from a nature perspective and the way the story is told, I actually found myself really enjoying the story, which is kind of surprising. Like I said earlier, Monster Hunter is not known for its stories, and I don't think it ever will be, but this was definitely a really good step in a direction that honestly I never expected them to take. I think the way that it wove the story into the fights, the way it introduced the monsters, and overall the way they paced it, it feels very tight, and I couldn't really blame anybody for enjoying it as much as I did. I know for a fact there's going to be somebody in the comments, or even somebody in general who played the game and goes, well, that story was really generic and it was really bland and it was really just about nature. And I'm like, yeah, but that's also kind of the point, right? Monster Hunter has never been a game that strays away from nature as its main topic, and I think in this one they kind of understood that, and they really did a good job of making the story center around what it means to have nature, to be around nature, and what it means to play God. Like, there's a lot of really cool elements in here that even if they weren't explored to their fullest extent, the fact that they're even present at all in a Monster Hunter game is already kind of a feat in and of itself. One of the last points I want to touch on before I leave you off with this review is how did the game perform? The few beta tests, if you did happen to play any of those, were a very rough state. I did happen to play the second one that came around, and I gotta be honest, it kind of worried me for the actual performance of the game. However, I am really pleased to say that honestly performance hasn't been as bad as I thought it was going to be. Again, playing on PS5, I had it on prioritizing frame rate. It looked really good at all times for me. I never noticed any really obvious glitches or bugs in the game when I was playing it. And the game never really suffered all that much graphically. I know there's going to be a few folks that are really going to be graphics snobs and are going to think that it does not look anywhere near as good. But for those of you who do that, normally you're going to play it on quality mode as opposed to frame rate, in which case the game also looks fantastic. But for me personally, I'm somebody who needs to have my games running at 60 or as close to 60 as I can, if not higher. So I was pleased to see that it seemed to keep around 60. I'm not 100% sure if it was 60, but the fact that it was staying around 60 to where my eye at least noticed that, I'm pretty comfortable with saying it did pretty well. It did stutter occasionally, but most of the time that stutter didn't last for more than about a second or two, and it went straight back to the normal frame rate I expected. So overall, pretty decent performance on PS5. I would assume Xbox would perform similarly. I know on PC there is quite a few issues, but I know Capcom is also working on getting patches rolled out for those. So I would say if you are worried about the performance of it, do some research on the platform of choice, but for PS5, I can say it worked okay. Overall, I have to say I have vastly enjoyed my time with Monster Hunter Wilds. I literally want to do nothing more than just stop this review right now and go play more, but I really wanted to get something out there for folks that are new to the series, folks that are really considering giving this a shot. And honestly, if you are somebody who has tried Monster Hunters in the past and you just bounced off of them because the structure didn't quite feel right for you, I would urge you to give this a shot, because I really think this is going to change your mind, at least with the way that this game is structured. I think the structure is a lot more simplistic, and I think it's going to grab a lot of new people. Whether or not you're going to want to stay for the endgame content and a lot of the content to come far after, that's going to kind of be up to you and if you can hang in there with the grind. But the fact that they kind of front loaded the story, I honestly feel was a good and smart decision to get new folks into this type of series. I really can't recommend it enough, and the beautiful part is I really feel comfortable saying you should spend $70 on it, and I do not say that about most games. I'm a very big cheapskate, but when a game gives me good bang for my buck, I can't help but realize and appreciate that. So kudos to you, Monster Hunter Wilds. You got me to put down $75 because of the Steelbook, so thank you for that. But really, though, in all honesty, I don't recommend ever spending $70 on a game. So the fact that I feel comfortable saying it is worth its price tag at $70 says a lot. And another nice note is that they're going to just keep adding content to it. Monster Hunter World got content added all the way up through, I believe, 2022, maybe 2021. So they do a lot of content post-game. And with all that being said, that is my review of Monster Hunter Wilds. Tell me, are you joining the series for the first time? Are you thinking about giving it a shot? Have you played the games in the past? What is your experience with Monster Hunter? I'm genuinely very curious because I'm somebody who has a very strange past with Monster Hunter. I'd love to talk about it sometime on a video or on a live stream, so we might have to do that as a video in the future. But please comment below, let me know what you think. As always, folks, thank you for watching the video. I hope you have a great day and take care of yourself.